Well, it's kind of tough to follow all of these wonderful presentations, and I appreciate Stefan for teeing up four-legged patients. That's the area that I deal in. I'm a veterinarian by training, but an entrepreneur and clinical researcher by trade. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit is leveraging comparative medicine, or what we call comparative translational research, to advance drug development, medical devices, and diagnostics. So the reality of, and this is not news to many in the audience here, but the reality of translational research is, and I've simplified this, it's much more complex, but we start with lab animals, okay, preclinical, discovery, optimization, preclinical research, typically in models, lab animal models. Hopefully we can get that into clinical research in human subjects. But this is a leap of faith, going from the lab to a human subject. We're talking about something in the orders of magnitude of raising $50 to maybe $100 million just to probably get into that phase 1 human subjects. And then, if we're lucky and we survive the clinical research process, phase 1 through 3, we get into public benefit. And that's really where innovations, convert into something of value. Within the lab, we have tightly controlled settings. This is ideal for characterizing mechanisms, underpinnings of disease. It's good at telling us how something works. But when we have a greater than 90% failure rate across all therapeutic categories in clinical research, tells us lab research is bad at predicting if something will work. And I don't care what we believe now, but the novel alternative methods, reductionist strategies. No, in order to get better at predicting if, we are going to have to move more towards real-world patients, real-world diseases, and real-world settings. Because the consequence of this, and a lot of people feel it, assets that have only lab animal research to back it are high risk to investors. It reduces the probability of moving that asset out of the lab and into a clinic. And by some accounts, probably more like 5% of all, less than 5% of academic innovations are successfully licensed and commercialized. Lab research drives innovation, but this is an important word. De-risking drives investment and interest. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit now, is the translational need. If we know the greatest need in translational research is if something will work, trying to predict that, we're not going to be doing that in the lab. We need a bridge. And I use this quote often: human and vet medicine are faced with the same challenges, I'm paraphrasing, and employ the same solutions. They are two branches of one medicine. Ironically, this was back in 1927. We never learned. Vet medicine is grossly underutilized in the drug development process, not just for animals, but for humans. Veterinary medicine, when you compare it to human medicine, and you compare those populations, dogs and humans, and particularly dogs, we both share high phenotypic diversity, which is important, similar diagnostics, therapeutics, interventions, and surgical procedures, and we have a similar physiology, and importantly, a similar exposures, environmental exposures. But equally important, and probably more important, dogs recapitulate over 120 diseases that we get. And we're talking about recapitulate in homologies at the molecular, cellular, physiological, and clinical pathology level. Autoimmune, cardiovascular, but king of the hill, or at least the most well-studied, is oncology. Glioblastoma, osteosarcoma. Dogs get these tumors and they are almost indistinguishable from the human version. So the One Medicine Group, we are here to, in terms of impact to Arizona, we are a translational bridge. It was founded by myself and Dr. Cordes, Brett the vet. We share backgrounds in industry, clinical practice, as well as academia. And we bring expertise in human and veterinary clinical research, FDA and USDA regulations, that's important. Technology licensing and negotiations, we're both entrepreneurs in product development and commercialization. So we formed this because we realized there's a gap in Arizona's translational research capacity. And this is just some snapshots of one of our clinical research centers, four-legged, not two-legged, surgery suite, minor procedures, imaging, and laboratory and in-house pharmacy. So we've been doing clinical research here for just about a year at this particular site, but as you can see, it mirrors pretty much what you would encounter in a human hospital. Our focus, and this is where the impact for Arizona comes to play, is really helping to drive comparative clinical research, de-risking assets prior to going into phase 1 or phase 2 human clinical studies. So we can do therapeutics, biologics, we do a lot of biospecimen collections for academic research or for diagnostic development, multi-omics. We can also help expand the technologies into the animal health market using our network, global network of business development colleagues within the big companies within animal health and the mid-tier companies. But I want to dispel any misconceptions. What we're doing here is similar to phase 2 human clinical trials, a diseased patient, and we're intervening or doing some type of observational analysis. We consent owners to every study. We screen and monitor our patients, albeit four-legged. But veterinary patient safety is a priority. We make sure that, whatever we're going to do, if it's an interventional trial, that the benefits should far outweigh any risks. And we also make sure we've got the appropriate regulatory authorizations before we do any clinical research. Track record, we opened last year. We've done no marketing, and we're drinking from a fire hose. There is such high demand for this to de-risk assets. We're working with companies in Asia, Australia, in the US, Florida, Texas, Colorado, and one group here in Arizona. Brings me to my point though. Our mission, our goal, is to focus on growing Arizona's biomedical research economy. We've already completed several interventional canine studies that have helped inform on human drug development, and we're onboarding a number of projects, even as we speak tomorrow. I've got a hyperspectral biological imaging study I'm getting started. But the impact for Arizona, and hopefully I've alluded to this, we're filling a major translational research gap, moving from the lab to the clinic. We're doing clinical research, but it's in a preclinical context. We're allowing companies, universities, researchers to get more reliable clinical data, de-risk the development process, inform on human clinical study design. But doing this increases the asset value, no doubt about it. And I can speak from 30 years experience in doing this. It also helps to attract investment for that asset. You got more reliable data, it's logical. That is going to increase the value. Maximize the market applications. So many companies out there are contacting us because they want to get into animal health. In the US, it's a $20 billion small companion animal market alone. And we can also help facilitate technology transfer through our network within the animal health sector. And I give an example here. I'll close with this. From 2015 to 2024, if my math is correct, and 4 out of 3 have trouble with math, I'm one of them, but number of patents awarded to our public academic institutes, over 2,200. A good number of licenses. The average license or option income per transaction is about $46,000. I'm not suggesting we increase that. We've already paid for it as taxpayers through NIH funding that goes back to universities so they can patent. But what I'm saying is we've got a lot of these that are stranded assets. They're going nowhere. Why? It's not the university's fault. They got prescribed grants. They can only do lab animal research. But if they could add value to some of these assets by getting a little more data that's far more reliable, I mean, it's putative. They would be more attractive for investment. They would be de-risks. So could we move 10, 20% more of these technologies out of the universities and into the private sector? So again, our objectives, this is something that does differentiate Arizona's translational research ecosystem. We're a resource to get more reliable data. We want to support both our public and private sectors. We are a private group. We're not associated or under the umbrella of any academic institution. And we want to accelerate the growth of Arizona's bioscience economy, stabilize it, grow it, and that's it.